All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to day 2 of ipcon. My name is Ryan Dunford, product manager here at Miro. It is my great honor to introduce to you today our core fiber networking brand, Bdcom. It brings me great pleasure to bring to you some of the successes that Bdcom has found over the past few years. We're going to discuss a little bit about what makes their product range so appealing and why has this brand catapulted previously, subjective transmission mediums such as WISPs into fiber providers. Around about 2 years ago, we had one of the largest WISPs in the country approach us for, PON technology. And we said, you're a WISP. This is fixed line infrastructure. What could you possibly have to be doing in this space? And they came back to us with a very simple answers that the market wants fiber, people want fiber, because at the end of the day, if you've got fiber, you've made it. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. So I just wanted to introduce myself and just say thank you to everyone that has joined us for ipcon over the past 2 days. It's really been a lot of good fun. I actually see that I've got some people that have been in my previous webinars. So I'm just going to shout out to Dita, Yaku, Nathan, Peter. I know that you guys were in our Bquant webinar. I hope that you enjoyed that. And the beautiful part about this is that part of working with Miro is that all of our technologies converge. And as I was discussing with you about the success that the Bquant customers have seen, when we look at the providers that we were discussing, the tier 2 and tier 3 ones, and we'll go into a little bit about the definitions about what separates those two. But when I was discussing about the successes of Bquant, that same provider uses Bdcom. And that same provider has been using Bdcom for 4 years, and they've got one of the largest fixed fiber line networks in Johannesburg. And then the other is the largest growing WISP in South Africa. I think that they don't need any introduction, but that is one of Bdcom's largest customers as well. And the beautiful aspect of Bdcom is that it's enabled service providers to vertically integrate their services so that they can appeal to a wider spectrum of users. Because as we've all seen, wireless revolutionized the internet landscape. It enabled mobile connections through to the internet, and also enabled previously disadvantaged locations that could get access to the internet. Because essentially, back in the old days when we were logging on the copper lines, it was kind of, wherever you were situated, if you were situated in the correct place at the right time, you could have access to a telephone line, so on and so forth. Now what's starting to happen is that we've noticed the huge dependency on internet access. And I think the fundamental takeaway is that internet access is only going to keep increasing. I feel with the younger generations that are coming through, the heavy reliance on media, digital media, audio, video streaming. If you guys just look at the camera these days, I'm no spring chicken, I'm also no old fart, but I remember one of my first cameras, and yes, if you could get 2 megapixels, you had a career in photography lined up for yourself. But now what's starting to happen is that the mobile phone has just transformed so drastically. We're seeing, 50, 60 megapixel camera. And, the technology is great, but how the hell are we going to view that? And how the hell are we going to send that to people? So thus introduced fiber, because essentially what started happening is that we needed to increase our core networking capacities. And that's what I'm going to show you in the upcoming slides. Is basically how the worldwide internet connects and how everyone is interconnected through fiber optics, and how just having access to a fiber termination point can really empower a country. Recently Kenya, Kespoc just, they got their fiber line. And now ever since then, it's revolutionized their mobile money infrastructure, because in Eastern Africa, mobile payments are huge, but they just didn't have the internet infrastructure in order to, capitulate it. So we've seen a vast amount of developments happening, and, being the fiber guy in a wireless company, you get a lot of heat, but when the growth's there, and the opportunities keep popping up, and the retention of the customers is now going into the years where we've had years worth of customer interaction. It starts to cement the fact that Bdcom is the real deal, and it should be looked at for all end-to-end fiber requirements. So without any further ado, this will be one of the last times you see my mug, but I'm going to unshare my webcam and I'm going to go straight into the Bdcom presentation, and I really hope everyone enjoys it. With some housekeeping rules, ladies and gentlemen, please feel free to add any questions, comments into the chat box. I am manning this presentation solo, so please just have pity on me and know that I will look at your comments as they go. So please feel free to add comments. There will be an opportunity to win a raffle prize at the end of the presentation, so stay tuned for that. But let's get straight into it. And when I was designing this presentation, I really wanted to pitch futuristic. I wanted to pitch high tech, because essentially there's a lot of talk about the fourth industrial revolution, the digital age. And without a doubt, it's a trend-worthy topic. But what does it necessarily entail? Well, you get all these autonomous driving, you get big data, 5G, 12G, all of these buzzwords that people have caught onto. But necessarily, how does it work? How is an autonomous vehicle going to be able to operate? What is needed to create a 5G network, a mobile 5G network? And I can tell you, all roads lead down the optical line, ladies and gentlemen, is that our life is built on fiber. Initially it was the old telegraph, and back in the early days when I got the brand, we used to speak about the first transatlantic transmission that happened between, I believe it was Washington DC and Buckingham Palace. Was a Morse code, essentially. It took 17 hours to traverse the ocean. Fast forward, we're getting 1 million gigabits per second of speed on one single mode fiber optic cable. I mean, that's just, it's unheard of, it's unfathomable. So I think a lot of the time what happens is that people assume that fiber is just a connection that runs into their home and that gives them good quality internet access. But no, fiber is the backbone of our communication, our global communication. When you want to send an emoji, it hops on a fiber line somewhere, and that's how we connect our countries, our continents, and our communities to each other, and that's through fiber. So let's get straight into it. So this is a little bit of the agenda today. As you know, we're going on a bit of a cruise onto this beautiful lake. We're going to look down the optical distribution network. I want to explain to you exactly where does Bdcom fall within a network. Why would you choose Bdcom? Because let me tell you, and this is not going to be a surprise, but there are a lot of products that can do what Bdcom does. But there are reasons why you should choose Bdcom, and I'll get to that. We're going to look at some of the Bdcom switches because, again, this is a part of their portfolio that is relatively untapped. But, thank goodness for fast early movers. Predominantly, I think that's why the brand has succeeded in our market, is because one or two customers took a chance and invested in Bdcom, and it's just provided value to them. End-to-end value. It's done absolutely everything that they needed to be because they've understood where they want to use it, how they want to use it, and why they want to use it. So once you get all of those three fields down and they are synchronized, you have a very good understanding of what type of product you are looking for. We're then going to look at PON. Again, there are no real new developments here in PON, but I feel that we need to explain it further because a common misconception is that there's only GPON. But when I speak about EPON, everyone's like, what's that? And I'm like, no, guys, EPON is just smaller GPON. And I'm not trying to simplify it in an extraordinary basic term, but that is it. That is the only real difference. Plus of the two, the protocols are slightly different. You've got one based off of I2 and one of IEEE. So essentially, if you have any type of networking background, EPON is actually going to be easier for you to adopt because of its standard. So we'll get into that. We'll look at network management because what is a network without the ability to manage, monitor, and maintain the network? We're going to look at trading and then a future worth investing in. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, it coincides exactly with the fourth industrial revolution rhetoric. All of these features, big data, IoT, all of these, empowerment advances in terms of the technological landscape, how are they going to run? How is the data going to be passed through? Let me tell you, it's going to be off of fiber, because only fiber can offer consistent, high-speed data transmission without sacrificing quality, without burning a hole in your pocket, and without inducing too much risk. If anyone's ever owned a blade of copper, you'll know what I'm talking about. South Africans love copper. We eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, specifically if it's in the ground. We'll open that manhole up and we'll take the copper. No one cares about glass, specifically because it can't be resold in large quantities like copper can. So initially, again, I feel that humanity has found a very effective transmission medium that can help carry the ever-increasing amount of capacity that we keep on discovering as consumers. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get straight into it. I want to show you something very cool. So this is, as of, I think, 2017, these are the main network nodes located all around the world. Now, what are these main network nodes? These are your termination points. These are your exchanges, should we say. So what is an exchange? It's basically where your upstream internet gateway is. It's your connection through to the World Wide Web. And this is how our world is connected. So if you're a tier 1 service provider, you're going to be like a CCOM. You're going to actually own the physical infrastructure on the ground. And then essentially what's happening is that you're creating these exchange points, and you are then reselling your core network onto a tier 2 provider. So I just wanted everyone to have a look at this diagram and really just admire human ingenuity. I mean, we're not a lazy race by any means. Sure, we've got lazy people, but if this is anything to go by, I mean, like the mere fact that we are interconnected, everyone thinks that that's just a saying, but literally, physically, we are connected via fiber optic cables, and these are all sitting very neatly under our ocean, not causing any harm to the environment, and basically just adding value. So this is very important when we start looking downstream, because it's very rare that we meet a lot of startup tier 1 distributors, mostly just because of the intense capital costs that are associated with owning fiber optic cables in the ocean. Because essentially what has to happen is that you own that piece of the ocean, sure, but you need to get it from A to B somewhere you can resell it. And that's itself is a crazy mission, because you have to go over the ocean. And what that means is that you have to lay a cable. So if there's a break in your cable somewhere, you're screwed. So tier 1 distribution, it actually sounds quite scary. We don't meet a lot of tier 1 distributors. We've got a few of them on our books, and we distribute products, but they will have a completely different niche set. But I'm pretty sure that 95% of our customers, specifically the ones in this webinar, are our tier 2 and our tier 3 distributors. So what does that mean? So as you can imagine, we've gone and the tier 1 provider has laid the fiber optic cable into the ocean and created these exchange points. Now what happens is that a tier 2 provider would then need to connect to the exchange point. So now a tier 2 provider is obviously someone that owns a physical network, because they're the ones that are going to have to build it and take it direct to consumers. So your tier 2 and your tier 3 provider can be synonymous. You can have a bit of a hybrid solution. It all depends on your ECN license, what type of service providing license that you have. Because what we've noticed is that the more downstream you go in terms of becoming a service provider, the lighter the costs are associated with becoming a startup. So if you are reselling a tier 2 provider's network, your capital costs are much lower, because you're not building the network's already there. But essentially what has to happen is that the tier 2 provider has to take the internet access from the exchange point to another point of presence, if you will. And essentially, so this is essentially how it can work, is that from the exchange point, you can have a tier 2 provider take it from the exchange point direct to the consumer. That's perfectly fine, because next thing you know, this exchange point is located in the middle of Pretoria, and there's a whole bunch of houses and everything around, and the customers are willing to pay. Go straight to consumer, just make sure you got the correct ECNS license. And then what starts to happen is that the further away they go from the exchange point, the more capital is required in order to expand their fiber. Not everyone has the cash. Ask Vumatel. Not everyone has the cash to go and lay fiber into every neighborhood. You're going to need a team, and that's essentially why this model has worked out very well in South Africa, the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Some of the best internet service providers, and it's funny, I like to say in inverted commas, how some tier 3 providers are rated as the top ISPs in the country, but they don't own the network. So they're kind of riding off of the success of a lot of hard work from a lot of other people that don't get the credit, because at the end of the day, the consumer doesn't care whether you're a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 provider. They only care about, are you bringing me internet access? How long is it going to take? And are you going to dig up my garden? So yeah, being part of the fiber game, I don't want to say you're a cowboy, but you live in the wild, wild west. There's a lot of things out there to get you. I mean, even in Durban, there were the land grabs that happened, and then even a few providers got kicked out of Durban. So it's really tough out there. So that's why you need to kind of develop a hybrid mentality approach, where you're looking at your possible network layout and you're thinking, okay, cool. If I apply for a way leave on this specific street, it's probably going to take me 6 months, 8 months if government's sharp and on the ball. But now I've got all these customers that cannot wait 8 months. Who's going to wait 8 months for internet? No one. So what do? Do you ignore them, lead them on for the next guy, or do you create a wireless micro-pop solution that can at least deliver them some decent speed just while you wait for the way leave? So then hopefully what happens is that by the time the way leaves arrive, you've paid off the way leave from the annuity brought in from the customers that are on your micro-pop solution, so that literally you don't also stop losing that money. Well, you don't stop earning that money, because now all of a sudden those micro-pop solution customers become your fiber customers. And then you move your micro-pop solution somewhere else. So you have to be strategic. You have to be thinking ahead of the game. Otherwise, what you're going to do is you're going to fall in between a fiber provider that has a lot of cash and a lot of time, and they're just digging. And that's not necessarily a splash zone that a startup wants to be in. And that's why specifically you need to try and find your identity as a service provider. What do you hope to achieve by your services? Do you want to do B2B? So do you want to sell your services to another business who then resells it? Or do you want to go direct to consumer? There's advantages going direct to consumer. Margin. There's also admin, and who's going to manage that? Like a tier 3 provider who's reselling your network is managing those consumers. And if those consumers start freaking out, then it gets managed by the tier 3 provider. But there's a whole bunch of contingencies involved there. But just to give you a bit of a background and to kind of stipulate exactly where does Bdcom fall in with all of this, is that you're going to need to move fiber from point A to point B. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to do that as cost effectively as possible, because behind closed doors, no one cares what a switch looks like, especially the consumer. The consumer doesn't care at all. So if you can minimize your cost to customer, remember, acquiring the customer is something else, but minimizing the cost to customer, getting that point of presence as close to the customer, the ideal customer as possible, that's what you should be aiming for. Because at the end of the day, as long as you are maintaining your costs, you'll be able to scalably grow and be able to increase your load at the same time without having to change out the fiber cable. So that's a very nice thing, ladies and gentlemen, is that you can literally go from a 10 gig network to a 40 gig network and not change out your cable. Whoa. With copper, we had to go from Cat 5 to Cat 6 to Cat 7. Now with fiber, it's just change out your network node. So that's why it's extremely important to understand that through Bdcom, you can move fiber from point A to point B cost effectively. And that's all you need to know from this slide. And that's all I'm going to speak about. So why Bdcom? Why would you want to choose Bdcom? Well, it's a brand for the internet service provider. Why do we say that? Well, they've been in operations for over 20 years. So they've been around. They've got a diversified product line. They don't just do OLTs and ONUs. They do network switches, chassis, a whole bunch of value-adding networking devices. They've got a large budget for R&D. I think what they told me is that 5% of their GP gets used for R&D alone, which is huge. That's a fair amount of dividends being used to develop your company's business. 32 support centers around the globe, mean they got your back. An OEM manufacturer. This is the reason why Bdcom is because Bdcom was producing OLTs and switches for 20 years, because essentially that's what an OEM is. They're an original equipment manufacturer. So what happens is that someone comes to them with a design and they say, okay, listen, I need 100,000 of these switches. Bdcom says, sick, this is how much it's going to cost you. And then they pump out 100,000 of those no brand switches. And then essentially what happens is that partner or whatever then labels it and so on and so forth. No one does their own manufacturing, not even Apple. All gets outsourced, ladies and gentlemen, and it all gets outsourced to an OEM manufacturer. So why Bdcom? It's because they're OEM. They know how to, after doing it for 20 years, you're like, I can do this myself. And that's where the Bdcom brand came from. It came from these guys that said, listen, we know how to do this. We know how to run and produce a network switch. So let's just do it ourselves. Plus, there's a lifetime warranty on the OLTs and the switches, which is a huge, courageous thing to guarantee, because we all know how sensitive network switches are in the greater scheme of things. All right, so let's look a little bit about the switches. Guys, we are pressed for time. I do apologize. I got way too involved in that opening address, but you know what? I just get so passionate about Bdcom. But the Bdcom switches that are on offer, we've got everything. We've got data center, campus switches, small office, home office, managed, unmanaged, 10 by 100 gigabit, SFP, SFP plus, QSFP. Majority of our PoE switches have got really high power budgets, which means that they are ideal for powering APs, phones, cameras, even outdoor CPE antennas, whatever you need to be powered by a PoE. A Bdcom switch can do it, plus there's a lifetime warranty attached to it. So PON, as you can see, all these people are like, oh, we want to know more about PON. Well, let me summarize it for you. So there's EPON and there's GPON. What are the differences between the two? An EPON OLT has a capacity of 1.25 gigs. A GPON is double that. So just that's it. That's the best way to explain it. And then, okay, the only real difference is that EPON is asymmetrical and GPON is symmetrical. And what we mean by that is that what packages are going to be offering? Are you going to be offering 80 megs down, 20 megs up, or do you need it to be symmetrical? And just really think about that, because who the hell uploads more than they download? It's almost the golden rule that we download more than we upload. And I'm not asking the YouTubers in the house, I'm not asking the people that stream for a living. The everyday Joes, the mom and pops, we download, we access our device, we download our feeds, we stream, we're downloading things, and sure, if we have a picture that we want to upload, we upload. So the asymmetrical disparity that happens on a consumer level is the reason why EPON should be a very viable choice for any company that's looking to build a small fiber network, because whether it's 1 home to 300 homes, why break the bank? If you can find a more feasible, reliable way of delivering that service to your customer, why not look at it? And you got to make sure that it has dynamic bandwidth allocation, because what happens is that people start using the internet at the same time, and you need to be able to allocate bandwidth based off of time slots and so on and so forth. And then, of course, as the provider, you need to be able to manage it. So the beautiful thing, ladies and gentlemen, I hope there's a slide. Oh, it's right next to it. The beautiful thing about Bdcom, whether you decide to invest in the 10 gig switches or the 40 gig switches or even the 100 gig switches, we've got 100 gig switches, ladies and gentlemen. But whether you decide to invest in that or the PoE switches or the OLTs and the ONUs, everything can be managed via one pane of glass. And just like this very professional Tani, you will be extremely impressed with the performance of the NMS, because it allows you to log into multiple OLTs from a centralized monitor, helps you save in your operational budget because you're not having to do so many call outs, because I think that's a big hindrance to a lot of ISP growth, is the call out fees, is because once you start scaling, the bigger you get, the more problems you have. It's the natural course of life. But essentially what starts happening is that all these small problems start to happen, and then you start running around trying to plug them, and that actually ends up spending, or it costs you more. So having a network management software allows you to set alerts, so that if there's any breaks in the fiber cable, if an ONU drops signal because there's no power, it can send you a report, an email, a notification, absolutely anything, just to let you know that there's a chink in the armor and you need to go and fix it. The best service provider is someone that can fix a fault before the customer finds out. The best service provider is one that can fix the fault before the customer finds out, because by the time the customer finds out, you're already paying catch up. Because why is it broken? Why am I paying you for a broken network? You don't want that. Things happen. Customers aren't very, flexible with, the intricacies of monitoring and maintaining a network. So having a network management software creates a very customer-centric service. And just some cool facts, it does do scheduling of autonomous tasks. So again, what happens is if you've got multiple OLTs out in the field, you can schedule a task to update all of those OLTs firmware, and then obviously the accompanying ONUs as well. All right, training, we're going to get straight into it. So look, when we do these presentations, ladies and gentlemen, we often don't know where we're pitching, because we can have someone that's never heard of Fibre before, never heard of Bdcom before, and they need to learn from scratch. Then on the opposite end of the spectrum, I've got people that know more about Bdcom than I do. And I love those people because they teach me things about my brand that I'm very grateful for. So where are you? Where are you currently sitting? If you were to say to us, okay, Ryan, I'd actually like to venture down and start a fundamentals training all over again. Or would you say that you are comfortable with your current level of knowledge on fiber networks and you're ready to become certified in Bdcom, and that's a specific type of training that you would require? All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we're going to just finish on the last slide here. So I wanted to end the presentation off with the future of fiber, and specifically, what are some of the fourth industrial technologies that have become so trendworthy in most ICT conversations, and those are artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT, big data, blockchains, cloud computing, autonomous vehicles, the big 5G network, geonomics, gene editing, and quantum computing. All of these are digital devices that can exchange an extremely high amount of data, because they're constantly learning, they're constantly developing, and they're going to need to have an infrastructure to accompany them. And as I said to you, and as I showed you in the beginning of the presentation with the tier 1 distributors, is that we rely on a fiber backbone. So build for the future, build for fiber, and build with Bdcom. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I just wanted to bring everyone's attention to this last slide. This is our barcode, probably the best barcode you'll see all day. If you can please scan this barcode, it will enter you into a raffle for a Bdcom prize. Hint, hint, it could be a 10 gig switch, but it could also not be, but it's a 10 gig switch. So if you guys could please scan this barcode, I'd love to give a 10 gig switch away to one of you lucky people. And just thank you everyone for your time today. I've really enjoyed having this opportunity to speak to you. I will open up the floor if there are any questions. I will just have a look at the chat here. Dieter says, I for one know squat. I know how to squat, Dieter. If you need help, I'll maybe send you a video. You just got to go ask to grass. Kidding. Again, and then Nathan says, again, I will email you my 1,000 questions because all of your presentations have and is what I need. Nathan, I'm very glad to hear that we are able to provide some form of value. I apologize if your connection took a bit of strain. We will be able to send you the presentation, but everyone, now has never been a better time to invest in Bdcom. We've seen the magic happen right in front of us. We've seen predominantly wireless service providers fully integrate fiber into their service offering, and they've flourished because at the end of the day, it's all becoming about hybrid solutions. And once we start scaling up in terms of capacity, you're going to need to have some form of fiber backbone. And if there's anything that Bdcom's good at, if there's anything that you take away from this presentation, is that Bdcom gets fiber from point A to point B cost effectively. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope that you enjoy the rest of ipcon. Goodbye for now. I'll see you later in the Untangle presentation. Don't miss out on that. We're going to be talking about next-gen firewalling and software-defined networking. Thank you all, and have a fantastic rest of your day.